The ship drifted through the cold silence of deep space, its hull torn open like a wound. Sparks floated through the corridors, dim blue emergency lights pulsing as if the ship itself was breathing through pain. The crew of the Oralis was still alive, barely, held together by luck, instinct, and one stubborn human named Lieutenant Mason Hale. When the meteor storm hit, it had come without warning, shards of iron and ice tearing through the outer plating faster than thought. The alien crew, a mix of species from the Galactic Compact, had done their best to stabilize the systems, but when it came to repairs, all eyes turned toward the human engineer. Hale had been thrown hard during the impact. He'd hit the deck, bounced off a bulkhead, and somehow managed to crawl out of a collapsing passageway. The ship's medbay scanners had screamed the moment they pulled him in. 17 fractures. 2 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and something that looked like a partial skull fracture. But Hale wasn't screaming. He was sitting upright on the edge of the medical table, breathing slow and steady, his face pale but calm. His jumpsuit was torn, his left sleeve soaked with blood from a deep cut along his arm. When the alien medic, Dr. Kethva, entered, her 4 golden eyes widened at the sight. The scanner projected a holographic skeleton in the air above the table, glowing faint blue. Every broken bone lit up like a constellation. 17 fractures, Kethva said in disbelief. You should be unconscious, possibly dead. Hale tilted his head slightly, looking at the glowing skeleton. 17, huh? Feels about right, he said, voice rough but light. Had worse once. Fell off a drop rig on Mars, broke 21 that time. Kethva blinked her eyes in rapid sequence, her species equivalent of confusion. You fell and survived? He gave a small grin. Yeah, gravity and I don't always get along. The medic pressed a hand to her forehead ridge, exhaling sharply. Lieutenant Hale, you need to stay in the pod. Your bones will heal, he finished for her. But your ship won't if no one fixes those power relays. He tried to stand, winced, then forced himself upright anyway. His left leg wobbled and he leaned against the table for balance. Hale, stop. You can't. He waved her off. I can. Just maybe not fast. The alien nurse beside Kethva made a soft sound, a mix between worry and awe. In her world, a fractured limb meant weeks in a healing chamber. A single rib crack could stop breathing for days. Yet this human stood there, blood dripping from his sleeve, talking about fixing machines as if nothing were wrong. The ship trembled again, a low groan echoing through the floor. Warning lights flickered. Hale turned toward the door, expression sharpening. That's the secondary oxygen loop. It's venting pressure. He started limping down the corridor, ignoring Kethva's protests. The medic followed, clutching a portable scanner. You're in no condition. I'm the only engineer left who knows the compact interface, Hale replied. Unless you learned how to reprogram a pre-fusion oxygen compressor in the last 10 minutes? She said nothing. He smiled weakly. Didn't think so. They moved through the flickering halls, past twisted metal and leaking pipes. The air smelled of burnt ozone and coolant. Each step jarred Hale's body. He felt bones grind and shift beneath his skin, pain screaming at him like static. He pushed it down, focused on the task ahead. Pain was just information. It told you something was wrong, not that you had to stop. When they reached the control junction, the panel was sparking violently. A burst of steam hissed out as Hale pried it open with a wrench. Get me the insulation gel, he said. Kethva handed it over with trembling hands. You can't possibly. Sure I can. He smeared the gel across the exposed circuits, ignoring the burns as the metal sizzled. His right arm shook, the broken shoulder screaming, but he kept his movement steady. See, the trick is not to think about it too much. Muscles remember. Machines remember. Pain forgets, Kethva didn't understand. Her species, the Velari, experienced pain in waves that could cause neural overload. For them, agony wasn't something to forget. It was a storm that consumed the mind. Yet the humans seemed to treat it like a stubborn tool, something to be worked around. Minutes passed. The air hissed as the pressure stabilized. The console beeped once, then held steady. Oxygen flow normal. He leaned back, panting softly. There we go. Breathing room again? The medic stared. You shouldn't even be conscious. Hale wiped a streak of grease from his face. You keep saying that, Doc. Maybe your scanner's broken. It's not the scanner, she said quietly. It's you. He looked at her, confused. You humans? You're made of soft tissue, fragile bones, weak gravity-borne frames. Yet you stand here with 17 fractures and you keep moving. Why? He thought about it for a second. The emergency lights reflected in his eyes like distant stars. Because something always needs fixing, he said finally. And if you stop every time it hurts, nothing ever gets done. She didn't respond. There was no logic in his words, but there was truth. By the time they returned to the med bay, Hale was limping worse. He sat down heavily, his breathing shallow. The scanner began another sweep, lights dancing over his bruised skin. The AI voice chimed softly. Warning. Fracture displacement increased by 12%. Immediate immobilization recommended. He waved at the console. Noted. You ignore medical advice now? Kethva snapped. Only the ones that get in the way, he said with a grin. The medic sighed, frustration and admiration blending into something unspoken. She began to wrap his arm in a support brace. Your species is impossible. That's the general opinion, Hale replied. But it keeps things interesting. Hours later, as the crew gathered in the mess hall, or what was left of it, the story spread. The human engineer had walked through the ship with 17 broken bones and saved their lives. For the starry pilot, who had never even seen blood before, it sounded like myth. For the crystalline Arelan navigator, it was terrifying. When Hale entered, leaning on a makeshift crutch, everyone went silent. He looked around, confused by the stares. What? He asked. The pilot pointed a trembling finger. The medic says you were dying, he shrugged. Guess I got better. 17 fractures, said another. How are you standing? Hale looked down at himself, then back at them. Practice? There was a pause. Then someone laughed. A nervous, shaky sound that spread slowly through the group until the whole crew was laughing, half from relief, half from disbelief. In that moment, something shifted. The aliens, who had once seen humans as reckless, fragile creatures from a small blue planet, began to see something else, a species that simply refused to quit. Later that night, as the ship floated silent once more, Dr. Kethva entered the medbay to check on her patient. Hale was asleep, one arm draped over his chest, his face calm despite the web of injuries across his body. She looked at the scanner, 17 fractures still glowing faintly on the display. She shook her head slowly. Impossible, she whispered. Then she looked at him again and something like a smile crossed her face. No, just human. Outside, the stars drifted past, a cold, distant, and endless. But somewhere among them, one small ship still lived because a fragile creature with a broken body refused to stop. And that, Kethva thought, was the strangest strength she had ever seen. She spent hours watching the humans' readings shift between impossible numbers. Every few minutes, Mason Hale's heartbeat slowed, then quickened again as if his body was arguing with itself about whether to give up or keep going. The medbay AI kept repeating warnings, but the human's vitals always stabilized on their own. His body, against all logic, was repairing itself little by little. When she finally left the medbay, the ship was quiet. Only the hum of emergency systems filled the air. Most of the crew were sleeping in the upper decks, exhausted from the meteor storm. But not Hale. She found him sitting near the main power conduit, a wrench in his hand and his legs stretched stiffly in front of him. The glow from the open panel painted his face in soft orange light. His expression was calm, focused but pale with pain. Mason Hale, she said, her tone sharp. You are supposed to be in the med bay. He turned his head slightly. Got bored. You are not healed, he smiled faintly. Neither is the ship. She folded her four hands across her chest. You are risking permanent damage. Your body is not meant to... Duck, he interrupted, tightening a bolt with a grunt. Right now, this ship's oxygen lines are running through a single backup tube. If that fails, we all stop breathing. I'm not taking that chance. She stared at him, half in frustration and half in admiration. His species was not built for endurance like hers. Humans did not have hardened exoskin or redundant organs, yet he was pushing his body as if it were made of iron. What are you even doing? She asked finally. He pointed to the mess of wires. Rerouting the secondary power grid. If I can get that online, we'll have lighting in the aft section again. Maybe even a little gravity back there, she sighed. You are impossible. Thanks, he said with a grin. I get that a lot. For hours he worked, refusing to rest. Every movement looked painful. His arm shook when he lifted the tools. His breath hitched when he bent forward, but he never stopped. Sometimes he muttered small jokes to himself or hummed an old Earth tune under his breath. The sound was strange but comforting, a soft rhythm of life in a silent ship. At one point, Kethva offered to take over. He looked up at her, eyebrows raised. You know how to crosswire a human capacitor? No. Then you're my assistant. Pass me the blue wire. She handed it to him carefully, unsure how someone could still smile while working through so much pain. After several hours, the lights flickered throughout the ship. A low hum grew stronger. Systems began waking up one by one. Navigation, internal sensors, comm relays. The crew began appearing from their quarters, blinking against the sudden brightness. The pilot, a tall Centauri with silver skin, saw Hale slumped near the power conduit and rushed over. You did this? Mostly, Hale said, leaning his head back against the wall. Though I had a pretty good assistant. Kethva made a noise that sounded like a sigh but carried a small hint of pride. The pilot looked at the glowing panels. We thought we'd lost power for good. Not yet, Hale said. She's still got some spark left. He gave the wall a small pat like one would to a tired but faithful horse. The starry frowned. You speak of this ship as if it's alive. To me, she is, Hale replied. Every system, every hum, every spark, and she talks if you listen. Kethva tilted her head. And what is she saying now? He smiled. She's saying thank you. Later, when the crew gathered in the mess area to eat their emergency rations, the story spread again. The human had walked on 17 broken bones, then brought the ship's power back online. Some thought he was showing off. Others thought it was madness. But most saw it for what it was, something close to heroism. The navigator, a crystalline being named Aerith, spoke first. Human Hale, she said in her shimmering voice. How do you tolerate such injury? Your biology should not allow this. Hale chewed thoughtfully on a protein bar before answering. Guess humans are just stubborn. We break, we heal, we keep going. It's kind of our thing. Doesn't it hurt? Another asked. Oh yeah, he said as if talking about the weather. Hurts like hell. But pain's just proof you're still alive. The aliens looked at each other, unable to decide if that was wisdom or madness. Kethva sat quietly, observing. She had lived through a dozen deep space missions and seen bravery in many forms, but this was different. The human didn't act brave. He didn't make speeches or demand attention. He simply did what had to be done, even when his body was failing. After the meal, she approached him again. You need rest now. The repairs can wait, he nodded. Sure, Doc, just one more thing, she groaned. There's always one more thing. This time it's serious, he said. We're still losing signal. Our comms are dead. I think the relay dish was damaged in the storm. If we can't reach the relay station nearby, we're stranded. Kethva froze. The Vecnar relay station? It has been abandoned for decades. I know, Hale said, but it's our only shot. I'm going to try and rewire the external antenna to boost our signal. She looked at him like he was insane. You cannot go outside in your condition. I'm not planning on going outside. Not yet anyway. He stood up slowly, leaning heavily on his crutch. Just need access to the upper control panel. Against her better judgment, she followed him again. The corridor lights flickered as they climbed toward the communications deck. The ship creaked around them, metal straining under its own wounds. When they reached the control room, Hale dropped his toolkit on the floor and got to work. He opened an old access panel, coughing as dust filled the air. These circuits haven't been cleaned since before I was born, he muttered. Kethva watched silently as he traced the cables, his fingers quick and precise despite the tremors of exhaustion. Every movement showed his experience. It wasn't just training. It was love for the craft. Humans, she realized, did not fix things for survival alone. They fixed them because they hated giving up. Doc, he said after a while, hand me that coil. She passed it over.
Why do you call me Doc?
My name is Kethva. He smiled slightly. Habit. Back on Earth, that's what we call our medics. It's shorter. She considered that. It sounds friendly. Yeah, he said softly, tightening another bolt. Guess that's the point. Hours later, a faint beep echoed through the control room. The signal lights on the panel flickered, weak but present. Hale leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. Got it, we've got partial comms. Maybe enough to send a ping. Kethva checked the readings. It's weak. Not enough to reach the nearest patrol ship. Then we make it stronger, he said. You need rest. I'll rest when we're safe. She stared at him, speechless. He wasn't just working past pain, he was working past reason. But somehow she couldn't bring herself to stop him. Every action, every word carried the same quiet certainty. We survive or we don't. But we never stop trying. When the others came to relieve them, Hale finally agreed to return to the medbay. He was limping worse than before. 17 fractures, Kethva muttered. Now probably 18, he chuckled weakly. Maybe I'll set a record. Back in the medbay, he lay on the pod as the scanner whirred softly. Kethva adjusted the settings, letting the regeneration field soothe the worst of the damage. "Doc," he said, voice tired but still teasing. "You ever notice something funny about space?" She glanced at him. "What is funny about space?" "It doesn't care. Doesn't care if you're Velari, Starry, or human. Out here, it's just you, your crew, and what you can fix. That's kind of beautiful, don't you think?" She looked at him, unsure how to answer. But deep inside, she understood. Humans had always lived under fragile skies, fighting storms and gravity and time. Maybe that's why they learned to keep going when everything else said stop. As Hale drifted into sleep, she stood beside him, watching his chest rise and fall. The medbay lights dimmed. Outside, the stars glowed faintly against the black. Somewhere deep in the ship, systems hummed to life again. Quiet proof that one injured human had refused to give up. Kethva smiled softly. "Maybe," she whispered. "That's why your kind survives when others don't." And as she left the room, the human slept peacefully, surrounded by the sound of a ship slowly healing, a reflection of its engineer. The next day began with the sound of metal cracking. The ship had stopped drifting, caught in the slow pull of a nearby moon. Outside the windows, a pale ring of dust and broken satellites floated around them like ghosts. The Oralis had survived the storm, but now it faced silence, the kind that meant isolation. Lieutenant Mason Hale stood in the control room, his right arm in a sling and his ribs wrapped tightly under his uniform. He looked tired but alert, scanning the flickering console in front of him. Every button glowed faintly, but the main communication grid stayed dark. Dr. Kethva stood behind him, arms folded. "We need a stable signal, Hale. The crew is running out of supplies. If no one finds us in a few days," he nodded. "I know, Doc, that's why we're going to the relay station." Her eyes widened. "That station is abandoned. It has not functioned in 50 years. "Then it's due for a maintenance check," he said with a faint smile. "You cannot be serious." "I'm an engineer. Doc, I'm always serious about old machines." She gave an exasperated sound, one that humans might have called a growl. "You are in no condition to travel. Even standing is a risk." He straightened, pretending her words didn't sting. "I'll manage. I just need one of the shuttles operational. The relay station's close enough. A short hop, less than an hour." Kethva stared at him for a long time. "If I cannot stop you, then at least I'm coming with you," he grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. The rest of the crew gathered in the hangar to watch them prepare the shuttle. It was small, barely large enough for two. The outer panels were scorched, but the engine still hummed when Hale powered it up. The pilot stepped forward nervously. "That station could collapse any moment." "Then I'll fix it before it does," Hale said. Kethva sighed softly. "You humans truly believe everything can be repaired?" "Not everything," he said, glancing at the flickering lights above. "But I like to try anyway." When the shuttle door sealed, the hum of its engines filled the hangar. The others stepped back, watching as it lifted off the floor and slid through the damaged launch bay doors. For a moment, the Oralis grew quiet again, as if holding its breath. Outside, the blackness of space stretched endlessly in all directions. The relay station came into view after 40 minutes, a lonely metal sphere floating among debris. Parts of it had rusted away, its solar panels cracked and dark. "Looks friendly," Hale said dryly. Kethva's eyes flickered with anxiety.
"How will we even dock?"
"The station's magnetic clamps appear offline. I'll do it manually." "Of course you will," she muttered. He guided the shuttle in close, using gentle bursts from the thrusters until they bumped softly against the station's docking ring. He stood up, groaning as his ribs protested. Kethva watched him pull on a thin repair suit and helmet. "You will not survive if you strain yourself more." He chuckled. "Relax, Doc, I'll just take a look." He stepped through the airlock, moving with slow, careful steps. The corridor beyond was dark, coated in dust. The lights flickered faintly as he activated a portable lamp. "Station's still sealed," he said through the comms. "No breach." "Good sign." Kethva's voice crackled in his ear. "What do you see?" "Old tech," he replied. "Real old. Human design, pre-compact era. This is from before we joined the galactic network." He touched a console and wiped away the dust. It lit up weakly, showing the faded logo of the Terran Exploration Authority. He smiled faintly. "Home-built. High kind of place." Kethva followed behind him, carefully scanning the walls. "I do not understand how such fragile structures lasted so long." "Because humans built them like we build everything," he said softly. "To last longer than we do." They reached the central hub. A cracked power cell sat at the core, surrounded by silent consoles. Hale knelt beside it and began checking connections. "We just need this fusion core to wake up. Then we can boost the comm signal from the Oralis through this place." "Can it even still function?" she asked. He shrugged. "Only one way to find out." For the next hour, he worked in silence. Every few minutes, his hand would tremble, or he'd stop to breathe through the pain. Kethva offered help, but he only shook his head. "Can't risk cross-wiring this one. It's old and temperamental. Like me." Finally, sparks flared. The lights around the hub flickered once, twice, and then glowed steady. The old relay hummed to life, its systems awakening from decades of sleep. "Would you look at that?" Hale whispered. "Still got some life left in her." The central screen came online, showing a faint, static-filled display. Kethva's eyes widened. "You did it," he smiled weakly. "Told you. Humans and machines, we've got an understanding." But then the console beeped sharply. "Radiation levels rising." Kethva frowned. "Something is wrong." "Yeah," Hale said, looking at the readings. "Reactor shielding's cracked. It's leaking energy through the conduits. If we don't stabilize it, this whole place shuts down again, maybe permanently." "Then we go," she said quickly. "We have enough signal to last a few hours." "That should be," he shook his head. "It's not stable. One power surge and the whole system fries. We'd lose everything. No signal, no chance of rescue." She stared at him, realizing what he meant. "You are not going in there." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I am. You will not survive. Maybe not. But the crew will." Before she could stop him, he opened the maintenance hatch and climbed inside. The narrow corridor led to the reactor chamber, glowing dimly with pale blue light. The radiation readings climbed higher, but still below lethal levels. He could manage it if he was fast. "Mason Hale," Kethva's voice echoed through the comm. "You will damage your body further." "You cannot," he cut her off gently. "Doc, you said it yourself. I'm not built for this. But I'm here anyway. That's kind of the point." He crawled through the tight space, pulling himself forward with one arm. Every movement sent pain through his chest. He could feel the broken ribs grinding, but he ignored it. His world shrank to the flicker of the reactor light ahead. "Almost there," he whispered. He reached the main junction and stared at the loose conduits. They were glowing faintly, overloaded with energy. If he didn't reroute them, the whole system would shut down again. He set to work, his hands moving with calm precision. Outside, Kethva watched the readings climb dangerously high. "Hale, the levels are rising. You must leave now." "Can't," he said. One more connection. There was silence, then a faint hum. The relay lights surged, flooding the station with power. The main comm system came online. On the Oralis, the crew cheered as they received a clear signal for the first time. "Signal's strong," the pilot shouted through the comms. "We've got contact. Rescue ships inbound." But in the relay station, Hale didn't answer right away. "Mason," Kethva said softly, her voice trembling. "Respond." After a moment, his voice came through, weak but steady. "Still here, Doc. System stable." She exhaled in relief. "You are a fool." "Yeah," he said, laughing faintly. "But a useful one." She found him sitting on the floor near the reactor hatch, his helmet cracked but intact. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were bright. "You did it," she whispered. "Team effort," he said, nodding toward her. "You kept yelling at me." "That helps," she almost smiled. "You risked everything." He looked at the glowing consoles. "Sometimes you've got to, if you want to keep something running." They rested there for a while, watching the station's systems hum quietly. The relay had come back to life, not perfect but alive. Just like the human who refused to quit. When they finally returned to the shuttle, Hale moved slowly, leaning heavily on Kethva's arm. The stars outside were brighter now, their light reflecting off the station's metal surface. Back on the Oralis, the crew greeted them with relief and disbelief. "You actually did it," the pilot said. "You brought the relay back online." Hale shrugged, his tired smile never fading. "Wasn't that hard?" Kethva looked at him sharply. "You nearly collapsed," he grinned. "Still counts as success." The crew laughed, the tension easing at last. Later, as the ship floated quietly toward safety, Kethva found Hale sitting in the observation room, staring out at the stars. His arm was still in a sling, his body bruised and battered, but his eyes were calm. "You could have died," she said softly. He looked at her, smiling. "Could have. Didn't. That's sort of our thing." She shook her head. "Your kind is strange." "Yeah," he said. "But we get the job done." Outside the window, the relay station flickered like a tiny beacon against the darkness, proof that sometimes even broken things could still shine. Days passed since the relay station came online. The Oralis floated safely in a calm orbit now, its engines repaired and lights glowing once more. Rescue ships were on their way, and for the first time in weeks the crew could finally breathe without fear. But for Lieutenant Mason Hale, rest did not come easily. He lay in the med bay, wrapped in the quiet hum of healing machines. His ribs were mended with support braces, his leg fixed in a cast and his arm held still in a sling. Yet, even with all that, his eyes were awake, studying the ceiling as if he were still tracing wires and circuits in his head. Dr. Kethva entered quietly, carrying a datapad in her upper hands. She glanced at the medical scanner beside the bed. "You should be sleeping," she said. "Can't," he replied. Too quiet is good. It means you are not about to explode something." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I do that on purpose." "I have seen the evidence," she said dryly. "The ship is still smoking in places you repaired." "Adds character," he said, closing his eyes for a moment. She sighed and checked his readings. "Your body is strange. It heals fast but unevenly. The fractures are closing, but the strain on your muscles is too high. You need complete rest," he nodded slightly. "Yeah, I hear you. Do you?" she asked. He opened one eye and gave her a half smile. "Not really." Kethva made a sound that might have been laughter if her species knew how to laugh. "You are the most difficult patient I have ever had." "That's probably true across the galaxy," he said. Before she could reply, the door slid open and the starry pilot stepped inside, his silver skin glimmering in the light. "The rescue ships have arrived," he announced. "They're docking now." Kethva's eyes brightened. "Finally," Hale nodded, smiling. "Good news." "They requested to meet the engineer who brought the relay back," the pilot continued. "They say the story's already spreading." "The story?" Hale asked, raising an eyebrow. The pilot nodded. "They are calling it the miracle of the relay. Every ship within 3 systems picked up the signal. No one can believe it was done manually, by a human with 17 broken bones." Hale groaned softly. "Ah, come on. It wasn't a miracle. Just some stubborn engineering." "That is not how they tell it," Kethva said. "They think you are some kind of hero." He looked uncomfortable at the word. "Heroes usually don't limp." "Perhaps that is why you are one," she said quietly. He looked at her, unsure what to say. Before he could answer, the intercom buzzed. "Lieutenant Hale, please report to the docking bay. The rescue commander wishes to meet you." He sighed, slowly sitting up. "Guess that's my cue." "You should stay," Kethva said quickly. "You are not strong enough," he grinned. "You really think that's going to stop me?" She exhaled through her nose. "Why did I even ask?" With her help, he stood and pulled on a clean uniform, one sleeve still pinned up around his arm. Every step made his body ache, but he moved anyway, his jaw set in quiet determination. The corridors felt brighter now, alive again. The hum of engines was steady, and the air smelled of warmth instead of burnt circuits. When they reached the docking bay, the crew had gathered. The large bay doors opened with a hiss, revealing a sleek rescue vessel from the Galactic Compact. Out stepped Commander Lisar, a tall being with translucent skin and calm crystal blue eyes. He approached Hale and extended a hand, or something close to it. "Lieutenant Mason Hale," he said in a voice that carried both respect and wonder. "You have done what no one believed possible. You repaired a dead relay by hand. You stabilized a ship with half its systems offline, And you did it while... He paused, glancing at the report on his wristpad. 17 bones in your body were broken. Hale shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly part of the plan. Lysar smiled slightly. Regardless, the Compact will want to hear this story. Humans will be proud of what you accomplished. Hale frowned. This wasn't just me. Kethava kept me alive. The crew held things together. I just did my job. The commander tilted his head. Perhaps, but there are many who would not have done what you did. The hangar filled with quiet for a moment. Even the sound of machines seemed to fade. Hale looked around at the faces of the crew, alien and human alike, and realized they were all watching him with the same expression. Respect. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I appreciate it, but really we just fixed what was broken. The commander nodded slowly. That is exactly why it matters. After the meeting, the rescue crew began transferring supplies and preparing to escort the Oralis back to the nearest station. Hale sat down on a crate near the hangar wall, tired but content. Kethva joined him, holding 2 small metal cups. I brought you something, she said. He looked curious. What's that? It's a Villari recovery drink. It helps with bone healing. He took the cup and sniffed it. Smells like old batteries. It tastes worse, she warned. He took a sip, made a face, and swallowed. You weren't kidding. She laughed softly. It will help. Guess it can't hurt more than I already do, he said. They sat in silence for a while, watching the crew work. The hangar was full of quiet movement. Engineers repairing panels, medics checking supplies, pilots preparing for departure. Life had returned to the ship. You know, Kethva said after a while, in my culture, we record the names of those who endure great pain for others. It is a sign of strength. Pain isn't really something we celebrate where I'm from, he said. We just deal with it. That is exactly why your kind fascinates me, she said. You treat suffering like an obstacle, not a destiny. You push through it as if the universe owes you a chance. He chuckled softly. Maybe it does, she tilted her head. Maybe it does indeed. Hours later, as the rescue convoy escorted them home, the Oralis' crew gathered in the mess hall for one last meal together before docking. The air was filled with warmth and quiet laughter. Hale sat among them, arms still stiff, ribs sore, but smiling. The pilot raised a glass to the engineer who fixed a relay with 17 broken bones. Everyone cheered. Hale waved a hand dismissively. All right, enough of that. But they kept cheering, their voices echoing through the room. It wasn't just about him, and it was about survival. About teamwork. About proving that even in the darkest moments, something human could shine through. Later that night, the ship floated silently again, stars passing outside the windows like rivers of light. Hale stood by the observation deck, leaning on the railing. Kethva joined him, her reflection faint in the glass. You should be sleeping, she said softly. Probably, he replied. But I wanted to see this one last time. The stars? He nodded. Yeah. Every one of them's a story waiting to happen. Kinda nice to know we get to keep writing ours. She looked at him for a long moment. Do you ever wonder why humans are the way they are? He smiled faintly. All the time. But maybe it's simple. We break, we fix, and we keep going. Maybe that's just what we do. Kethava's golden eyes softened. You are more than that. You remind others that even small, fragile things can change everything. He looked at her and grinned. Fragile, huh? You should tell the relay that. She almost laughed. No, I think the galaxy already knows. The Oralis continued its slow journey toward the rescue station. Behind them, the repaired relay station shone like a small beacon, a reminder of what one determined human could do, even when the odds were impossible. And though Mason Hale never thought of himself as special, his story traveled faster than light. Across colonies and ships, beings of every kind spoke of the human with 17 broken bones who refused to stop working. Some called him reckless. Others called him brave. But most just called him what Kethva had quietly decided long ago, a symbol of something simple and powerful, not strength without pain, not courage without fear, but endurance, the quiet, stubborn kind that refuses to fade. And as the stars drifted by, Mason Hale finally let his eyes close. His body needed rest. His work was done. The galaxy would remember the human who shrugged at 17 broken bones and said, "Oh, that."